Let me tell you something you might not want to hear, but desperately need to. When you deal with an avoidant, you are not just dealing with silence, distance, or withdrawal. You are stepping into an arena where the game is not played with fists, but with your mind, your heart, and your deepest insecurities. And if you don't recognize their tactics, if you don't name them, you will lose yourself in the fog they create. Avoidants don't just walk away physically. They chip away at your self-worth piece by piece until you start questioning your own reality. They make you think you're the problem, and once that seed is planted, you water it with self-doubt, overthinking, and the desperate need to fix things. But today we are ripping off that mask. Today, I'm giving you the blueprint, the 7 manipulation tactics they use. And once you see them, you'll never fall for them again. This isn't about hate. This is about power. Your power. The Vanishing Act is not just about someone taking space. It's about timing, precision, and the deep emotional chaos it leaves behind. When an avoidant disappears, it's rarely random. It often happens at the exact moment you start to feel a little safe, a little more connected. Maybe you've just shared something vulnerable. Maybe you've both had an intimate moment. Maybe you felt the wall between you drop just an inch. And then, gone. No fight, no warning. No explanation. They vanish like a magician stepping behind a curtain. And the silence that follows isn't empty. It's loud. It screams in your mind, "What did I do wrong?" You start replaying every word, every glance, every moment, trying to pinpoint the trigger. That's the trap. The Vanishing Act forces you to obsess over you instead of recognizing it's their pattern. See, avoidants know, whether consciously or not, that their disappearance hooks you deeper. When they pull away, they create a vacuum, and human nature hates a vacuum. We rush to fill it with reassurance, with apologies, with desperate attempts to make the connection feel safe again. But what you're really doing is training yourself to accept their absence as part of the normal cycle of your relationship, and over time, that normal becomes toxic. The emotional toll of this tactic is brutal. It activates your attachment wounds, triggers abandonment fears, and slowly teaches you to lower your expectations. You stop asking for emotional closeness because every time you get it, you fear it will be taken away. And that fear keeps you in emotional quicksand. You can't move forward without sinking. But here's the truth they don't want you to see. Their vanishing is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their inability to sit in intimacy without feeling threatened. When closeness hits a point that stirs up their fears of being trapped, judged, or vulnerable, they run. Not because you're too much, but because they've never learned how to stay. When you stop chasing after the disappearing act and start holding your ground, you disrupt their pattern. You force them to face the silence they created. And in that moment, the power begins to shift, because you're no longer dancing to the rhythm of their absences. Selective memory is one of the most insidious tools in the avoidance arsenal because it doesn't just erase moments, it rewrites the history of your connection. It works quietly, almost invisibly, until you start to question your own recollection of events. You might remember a deep conversation where they opened up, where they told you they felt safe with you, where they made promises about the future. But later, when you bring up, they loot you blankly as if you've imagined it. "I don't remember saying that. You must have misunderstood," or they'll downplay it. "It wasn't that big of a deal." This tactic is powerful because it destabilizes your trust, not just in them, but in yourself. Once they've planted seeds of doubt about your memory, you start second-guessing everything. Did they really say they missed you? Did they ever agree to meet your friends? Did they promise to call? Or were you reading too much into things? And here's where it gets dangerous. Once you start questioning your own memory, they gain control over the narrative of the relationship. They decide what's real and what's not. Avoidants often use selective memory when it comes to emotional milestones. They forget the moments that reveal vulnerability or commitment because those moments are uncomfortable for them. Vulnerability threatens their protective shell. So the easiest way to deal with it is to erase it. And by pretending it never happened, they free themselves from having to follow through on any emotional investment. The pain this creates in you is subtle but corrosive. It makes you feel unseen and unheard, like the intimacy you thought you shared was nothing more than a dream. Over time, You start lowering your expectations, telling yourself not to make a big deal out of promises or special moments because you're afraid they'll be denied later. That's exactly how they keep you in a cycle of lowered needs and quiet compliance. But the reality is, your memory is not broken. You're not imagining things. Those moments happened. They were real. The warmth in their voice, the softness in their eyes, it was there. Selective memory isn't about truth, it's about control. It's about protecting their emotional distance at the cost of your reality. When you start documenting your own truth, whether in your mind, in a journal, or even just by refusing to let their denials override your experience, you take back your power. Because the moment you stop letting someone rewrite your history, you stop letting them define your worth. Guilt flipping is one of the most emotionally draining games an avoidant can play because it doesn't just deflect responsibility. It makes you carry the weight of their behavior on your shoulders. It often starts subtly. Maybe you try to talk to them about how their distance makes you feel, hoping for understanding. Instead of hearing you, they twist the conversation so it becomes about how your actions are the real problem. Suddenly, it's not about the hurt you're experiencing. It's about how you've made them uncomfortable, how you've been too needy, how you've put too much pressure on them. The manipulation lies in the shift of focus. You come in seeking resolution, but you leave feeling like you've wronged them. They make you question whether you're overreacting, whether you're being unfair. And because you care about them, you start apologizing, not just for how you expressed yourself, but for even having the feelings in the first place. This is how guilt flipping keeps you silent. If speaking your truth always ends with you feeling guilty, you eventually stop speaking at all. The emotional impact is heavy. Guilt is a powerful motivator, and avoidants know this instinctively. If they can make you feel bad for needing closeness, they can protect their emotional space without ever admitting they're avoiding intimacy. They turn their withdrawal into your fault, their silence into your responsibility. And little by little, you start adjusting yourself to not push them away, which means shrinking your needs, your voice, and sometimes even your personality. This tactic also plays on empathy. If you're a caring person, you're wired to ease someone else's discomfort. When they position themselves as the wounded one, you rush to soothe them, even if they're the ones who hurt you. And in that role reversal, the original issue is buried under a pile of your own apologies. But guilt flipping isn't about mutual respect, it's about control. It's a way to avoid accountability while keeping you in a loop of self-blame. The truth is, it's not wrong to want emotional connection. It's not too much to want consistency, love, and effort. You don't need to apologize for being human. The moment you start noticing when the blame shifts unfairly onto you, you create a boundary in your mind. You stop automatically accepting responsibility for their withdrawal. And when you refuse to carry guilt that isn't yours, their tactic loses its power. That's when you start standing on solid emotional ground again, untouchable by the storm they're trying to pull you into. The silent punishment is more than just not answering a text or ignoring a call. It's a calculated withdrawal meant to make you feel powerless. When an avoidant uses silence, it's not simply about needing time to think. It's about controlling the emotional temperature of the relationship. They know that silence is unsettling. They know it makes you uneasy, restless, and desperate for resolution. And they know that in that desperation, you'll likely be the one to bend, to reach out, to compromise, even if you did nothing wrong. The cruel thing about this tactic is that it preys on your natural need for connection. Humans are wired to seek closure, to repair ruptures in relationships. When they withhold communication, they are not only denying you that closure, they are training you to chase after it. You find yourself sending long, heartfelt messages trying to fix things, calling multiple times or over-explaining just to get a simple response. And every time you do, the balance of power tilts further in their favor. Silence, in this form, is a weapon. It's an unspoken way of saying, I'm in control, and you'll only get my attention when I decide you've earned it. It puts you in a state of emotional limbo where your mind becomes a torture chamber of what-ifs. Did you say something wrong? Did you push too hard? Did you make them upset without realizing it? And as you spiral through these questions, you become more willing to accept less from them, because anything feels better than the void. What makes silent punishment especially damaging is that it masquerades as nothing. They can easily say, "I just needed space," or "You're overreacting." And because silence leaves no tangible evidence, it's easy for them to avoid accountability. But make no mistake, consistent, intentional withdrawal after conflict or vulnerability is not about space, it's about control. Over time, you start to fear the silence more than the conflict. You stop speaking your needs, holding your boundaries, or addressing their behavior because you know the cost will be days or weeks of emotional exile. This is how they teach you to self-censor, to make yourself smaller, to keep the peace at your own expense. But here's the truth: they don't want you to see their silence says more about them than it ever does about you. It's not a reflection of your worth, but of their inability to engage with intimacy in a healthy way. And the moment you stop scrambling to break the silence and instead stand firm in your own calm, you take away the very power they were using to keep you under their control. The hot and cold push-pull is one of the most addictive and confusing patterns you can experience with an avoidant. It's the emotional equivalent of being given a sip of water in the desert, just enough to keep you alive, but never enough to quench your thirst. One day, they're warm, attentive, and even affectionate. They text you first, they make plans, they say things that make you feel seen and valued. In those moments, you start to believe maybe they've changed, maybe the connection is finally settling into something safe. But then, just as quickly as they leaned in, they pull away. Calls go unanswered, messages take hours or days to get a reply, and their body language shifts into something distant and closed off. This swing from closeness to distance is not random. It's a cycle that keeps you hooked. The highs are intoxicating because they feel rare and special. You start living for them, waiting for the next wave of warmth. And when they pull away, the absence feels unbearable, which drives you to work harder to win back their attention. This is exactly how the push-pull traps you. It makes you mistake inconsistency for passion. The psychological impact is profound. Your nervous system gets caught in a loop of anticipation and anxiety. You're constantly scanning for signs. Are they leaning in today or leaning out? You adjust your behavior, your words, even your emotional expression to keep them in the warm phase for as long as possible. But no matter how careful you are, the cold phase always comes. And every time it does, it hits harder because it contrasts so sharply with the warmth you just had. Avoidants often use this tactic, consciously or not, because it gives them control over the depth of intimacy. When they sense the connection is getting too close, they pull back to reestablish emotional distance. Then, when they feel safe again, they return with just enough affection to keep you invested. The problem is, you end up chasing the version of them that shows up during the warm moments while ignoring the reality that the cold moments are just as much a part of who they are. Over time, this push-pull dynamic can condition you to settle for inconsistency. You convince yourself the highs are worth enduring the lows, not realizing that the very unpredictability is what keeps you emotionally dependent. The truth is, love shouldn't feel like a guessing game. Real connection grows in stability, not in the whiplash between closeness and distance. The moment you stop running after the warmth and start demanding consistency, the game begins to lose its grip on you. The comparison game is one of the most subtle yet deeply wounding tactics an avoidant can use because it slips under your skin and quietly erodes your self-worth. It doesn't always come in the form of direct insults or obvious put-downs. Often, it's hidden in passing remarks, in stories they tell, or in the way they speak about other people. Maybe they mention how someone else handles things better or doesn't get so emotional. Maybe they casually bring up an ex, pointing out how low maintenance that person was or how much fun they had with them because there was no drama. On the surface, these comments might seem harmless, but underneath, they send a clear message. You are being measured and you're coming up short. The cruelty of this tactic is that it's rarely outright. It's slippery, deniable. If you call it out, they can claim you're overreacting or misinterpreting. This makes it even more effective, because now you're not only dealing with the sting of being compared, you're questioning whether you're imagining it. Over time, this plants a seed of inadequacy. You start holding yourself up against the phantom standards they've created. You try to be more like that other person they admired. You suppress parts of yourself they've implied are too much or not enough, and in doing so, you lose pieces of your authenticity. The comparison game works because it taps into a deep human fear, the fear of not being good enough. Avoidants use it to create emotional leverage. If they can make you feel like someone else would be easier to love, they can pressure you into changing to fit their comfort zone. It keeps the focus off their inability to meet you emotionally and puts it squarely on your perceived shortcomings. What's even more damaging is that these comparisons can make you compete for their approval without even realizing it. You find yourself trying to win against people who aren't even in the room. You start thinking, if I can just be more like that, maybe they'll treat me better. But that's the trap. The finish line keeps moving. No matter how much you adjust, the comparisons never stop because the game was never about you not being enough. It was about them keeping control by keeping you uncertain. The truth is, the moment you start recognizing this pattern, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop trying to measure up to someone else's idea of better and start valuing yourself for who you are. And once you see the comparison game for what it really is, a manipulation, not a reflection of your worth, it loses the power to shape how you see yourself. Victim role reversal is one of the most disorienting and emotionally draining tactics an avoidant can use because it flips reality upside down and leaves you feeling like the villain in your own story. It happens when you confront them about their behavior, maybe their distance, their broken promises, or their coldness. And instead of acknowledging your pain, they shift the focus entirely. Suddenly, they're the one who's hurt. They tell you how stressed they are, how much pressure you're putting on them, how your expectations are making them feel attacked or suffocated. This tactic works because it catches you off guard. You enter the conversation expecting accountability or at least understanding, but you leave feeling like you've done something wrong. If you're empathetic, and most people who get entangled with avoidance are, you quickly move into the role of comforter, forgetting that you were the one seeking comfort in the first place. They position themselves as fragile, overwhelmed, and misunderstood, and you end up soothing them while your own wounds go unattended. Over time, this reversal trains you to avoid bringing up issues altogether. You start thinking, if I bring this up, it will just upset them, or I don't want to make them feel bad. This is exactly what they want: silence. When you stop confronting them, they no longer have to face uncomfortable truths about their own behavior. Instead, the relationship begins to orbit entirely around their needs, their triggers, and their comfort level. The emotional damage here is profound because it messes with your internal compass. You start doubting whether you have the right to feel hurt, whether you're too demanding, or whether you're being unfair. This constant self-questioning erodes your confidence and your ability to trust your own perceptions. And when you can't trust yourself, it becomes much easier for someone else to control the narrative. Victim role reversal also serves another purpose. It allows them to avoid intimacy without openly rejecting you. If they can make you believe you're the one causing harm, then their withdrawal or coldness seems justified. They don't have to admit they're afraid of closeness. They can simply frame it as self-protection from your supposed behavior. The truth is, asking for emotional connection is not cruelty. Wanting consistency is not an attack. Their discomfort in the face of your needs is about them, not about you. Once you see victim role reversal for what it is, a deflection, not a truth, you begin to step out of the mental fog it creates. And when you refuse to carry the guilt they're trying to hand you, the power of this tactic begins to crumble. The power shift begins the moment you decide you are no longer willing to play the game on their terms. For so long, the rhythm of the relationship has been dictated by their moods, their availability, and their comfort level. You've learned to tiptoe around their silences, to second-guess your words, to shrink your needs so you don't push them away. Without even realizing it, you've allowed the balance to tip entirely in their favor, where they hold the emotional remote control, and you're left reacting to whatever channel they switch to next. Taking back your power doesn't mean shouting, demanding, or trying to force them to change. It means reclaiming your right to exist in the relationship as a whole person with needs, boundaries, and a voice. It starts with recognition. When you finally see the tactics for what they are, manipulations, not reflections of your worth, you stop taking their behavior personally. You stop thinking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "Why am I tolerating this?" That question is the turning point. The shift also happens when you refuse to be baited into the emotional traps they set. When they vanish, you don't chase. When they guilt flip, you don't fold. When they play the comparison game, you remember your value is not up for debate. When they reverse the roles and paint themselves as the victim, you don't hand over your empathy at the cost of your own self-respect. This isn't about being cold or punishing. It's about standing so firmly in your truth that their tactics can't penetrate it. The power shift is not an overnight event. It's a series of small decisions that add up. You start saying no when something doesn't feel right. You set clear boundaries and actually follow through. You begin to invest more energy in your own life, your goals, your passions, your well-being, than in decoding their behavior. And as you do, something unexpected happens. The game stops feeling so important, and avoidance manipulation loses its potency when you no longer depend on their validation to feel whole. The more you stand in your own worth, the less you're pulled into their cycles. They may notice the change. They may push harder at first, trying to regain control. But once you've experienced what it feels like to hold your own ground, it's nearly impossible to go back to living in their shadow. This is the true power shift. When the relationship is no longer the center of your emotional universe, and you realize you are free to choose something healthier, stronger, and far more aligned with the love you deserve. When you finally see the mind games for what they are, the fog begins to lift. You start realizing that the way they vanish, twist your words, withhold affection, or make you question yourself was never about your value, it was about control. Every tactic, from selective memory to victim role reversal, was a way to keep you in a cycle where you doubted yourself more than you doubted them. But now, the curtain has been pulled back. You've named the patterns, you've recognized the mechanics of the manipulation. And once you name something, you strip it of its hidden power. It's not enough to simply understand these tactics. You have to take that knowledge and turn it into action. That means no longer chasing someone who disappears to punish you, no longer apologizing for feelings that are valid, no longer contorting yourself to fit an image they've built through comparisons. It means drawing boundaries that aren't just spoken, but enforced. Every time you choose self-respect over their approval, you weaken the hold their behavior has over you. This isn't about winning against them. It's about winning yourself back. There will be moments when old habits pull at you. You might feel the urge to reach out during the silent treatment, to defend yourself when guilt is thrown your way, to work harder for the scraps of affection in the push-pull cycle. But each time you resist, you're rewiring your emotional instincts. You're proving to yourself that you can survive discomfort without surrendering your dignity. In doing so, you're teaching yourself a new truth. That love built on manipulation is not love worth keeping, and that real connection does not require you to lose yourself to keep it. The journey from entanglement to empowerment isn't smooth, but every step is worth it. You will find that the more you center your life around your own growth, joy, and peace, the less room there is for anyone to play games with your mind or heart. You will notice the shift in your energy, in the way you carry yourself, in the way you respond instead of react. And with that shift, you'll attract people and relationships that are capable of giving the respect and consistency you've always deserved. So, let this be the moment you draw the line. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in love for yourself. The avoidance mind games only work when you agree to keep playing. The second you put down the pieces and walk away from the board, you step into a life where your peace is no longer negotiable, your worth is no longer questioned, and your heart is no longer held hostage. That is your victory. That is your freedom. And it begins now. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. If this message spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful insights every week. Your support helps us reach and empower more people who need to hear this truth. Until next time, take care of yourself, protect your peace, and remember, you are worthy of the love you give. Goodbye for now, and see you in the next video.